All of the subtleties referencing Rey's lineage have lost all validity. The suspicions surrounding the lack of planning at Lucasfilm concerning the character of Rey have now truly come to light. My name is Zayfritz. Let's jump into the story. Daisy Ridley revealed in a recent interview with Josh Gad that she was entirely unaware of Rey's namesake up until J.J. Abrams revealed to her during filming of The Rise of Skywalker that she would be the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine. And this wasn't even set in stone, as Abrams came back to her a couple of weeks later saying, "Nah, I'm not sure," but then, obviously, he changed his mind back at some point. Ridley went on to say that there were several ideas in place for Rey's bloodline, including that of Obi-Wan Kenobi. This was even acted on in the flashback scene from Maz Kanata's castle in The Force Awakens after Rey picks up Anakin's lightsaber. The simple fact is, though, that these writers had no idea who Rey was going to be. The story was being written as they went. All they did to tease at Rey's parentage is put out the window. There were a couple clues we could apply to Rey being a Palpatine, including the style she used to fight Kylo Ren on Starkiller Base, and even her own theme music. Red Kyo made a really cool video covering this topic. I've linked his work in the description. But with the revelation that this news was never broken to Daisy Ridley until they were already on the scene of the final installment to a saga spanning 42 years, it's hard to find any real meaning behind these hints. They had no plan. They didn't know which of these ideas they would go with. The writers threw some names at a wall and hoped one would stick, until The Last Jedi came out, of course. But there's no point in beating that dead horse. It's very obvious that Rian Johnson's subversive maneuvers in Episode 8 influenced the final result. So I want to focus solely on these two movies which J.J. Abrams had control of. Even in doing so, just looking at JJ's work, it's apparent now that they had no identity built for her. She was supposed to be someone huge. Rey Skywalker, Rey Kenobi, Rey Palpatine, Rey Binks, but in reality, she was always just Rey. It is still worth noting that this trilogy would have obviously been much different had the directors shared the same interest in how the story progressed. In its final state, the sequel trilogy hardly feels like a trilogy at all. So many potential connections were absolutely wasted. One that I want to mention specifically is that of Obi-Wan Kenobi. One of my favorite things they did in the sequels was bringing Obi-Wan's message to Rey full circle. It's a simple thing to pick up on, but it's also kind of easy to miss. In The Force Awakens, he whispers to Rey, "These are your first steps." An obvious nod to Kenobi's words to Luke on the Falcon in A New Hope, and a very nice surprise for fans as we hear both Ewan McGregor and Alec Guinness within the same scene. In Rise of Skywalker, as Rey lies on the floor nearing death at the hands of her grandfather, the voices of the past Jedi come to her, where Obi-Wan opens with, "These are your final steps, Rey." This connection was so cool by itself, but this scene would have really carried some weight and emotion if Obi-Wan Kenobi were to be her grandfather in the grand scheme of things. The clues were there. Rey's first experience with the Force was a mind trick, for crying out loud. They knew we were going to see this as a parallel to Old Ben, but the whole thing now was just a spitball. I know all of this last section really borders on a fan fiction, and that's not what this video is about, but it's just depressing to see that this character was so awfully written, and now on top of it, had a personality complex. Would you have preferred Rey be a Kenobi? Do you think Rey's story had a different direction under JJ's outlines? Let's talk about it. Thank you all for tuning in, and be sure to watch those wrist rockets.